Even Arkansas doesn't believe they're beating Auburn in Jordan-Hare Stadium.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We're live from Radio Row here at SEC Media Days. Got two interviews to drop for you today. The first is John Nabors, host of Locked On Razorbacks. He doesn't think Arkansas can beat Auburn at Jordan-Hare Stadium. We're all on the same page there. Then also I joined Michael Brauner of WNSP. That conversation coming up later. Little crossover action with Locked On Auburn and Locked On Razorbacks. I'm Zac Blackerby. He is the handsome, incredible, immaculate John Nabors. Week 4, Auburn hosts Arkansas.
Yep.
The Auburn perspective is this is a gimme. This is a game that Auburn should win. What's the Arkansas perspective on this?
Yeah, Auburn should win. It's kind of the Arkansas perspective on it. But
okay,
here's the thing. I can't remember if we talked about it, but it is kind of crazy how Arkansas going on the road to Auburn usually has been pretty successful. I mean, obviously the Chad Morris eras. We don't talk about that one. But
okay,
you think back in 2022, Arkansas won. 2020, Arkansas won. Or 20, yeah, they won. I know the score didn't say that, but Arkansas won.
Oh, the backward spike
the backward spike.
Right.
18 and 16, 14, that was a stretch where Auburn had it. But then 12, 8, 08, 06,
wow,
04,
we're going
02.
way back now. Okay.
Just telling you, there's just something about it where it's always been close.
What about
games.
in the 1980s? Does that matter?
It does.
Okay.
It was the year or decade I was born, so
wow.
yes, it does matter. But yeah,
wow, how about that?
No Razorback fan is expecting to go in there and win, but they're also not expecting like Auburn to be this juggernaut that's just like, oh, we have no chance against them. I think Razorback fans just don't know what Arkansas is right now.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you could say the same thing about Auburn. It's like we think we know, like we think Peyton will be a little bit better, like we think the receivers and the offense will be better than a year ago. Such a low bar. You got to feel it's going to be a little bit better, but I'm sure Arkansas feels the same way.
Yeah.
New quarterback, new offense. It's just a lot of unknowns for both of these teams.
Yeah, and maybe you can agree to this too. I feel like personally, Auburn and Arkansas might be the least two talked about teams at SEC Media Days. I mean, I know people are like, oh, Vanderbilt or whatever, but as far as like teams that
have a fan base,
yeah, I don't know if you've got that vibe or not, but I just feel like I haven't heard much about Auburn, and I also feel like I haven't heard much about Arkansas, and maybe just because they're going to today and last, and maybe that's the case.
maybe like not hearing a whole lot about Florida this week either. I'd probably put them in that that tier 2, but I've sat down with so many people this week, and it's like they're interviewing me about their Auburn stuff, and they pull up Auburn's schedule, and it's like, oh, wait, yeah, like y'all can win 8 or 9 games. Like it's not the traditional SEC West, and you guys benefit from that too.
Yeah, I know. It's like we don't have to play Georgia or Alabama over in Arkansas for like the first time ever.
We still have to do that, but you don't have to play Ole Miss. Auburn doesn't have to play Ole Miss. You don't have to play LSU. Like it's significantly easier than it typically is.
Yeah, and for Arkansas too, their schedule's always going to be tough, like no matter what. But it's easier than what it has been because your 4 SEC games at home are against Ole Miss, LSU, Texas, and Tennessee.
Yeah.
And you only have 3 true road games this year in the SEC, where you go to Auburn, to Mississippi State, and to Missouri. Because the A&M game is in Arlington as a neutral site.
Rank those as far as like likelihood of a win.
The 3 road games? I'd say the biggest one likelihood is Mississippi State.
Sure.
New coach, Jeff Lebby, who I think is a good coach. And he might do some good things there, but that's probably the most likely. And then, honestly, I'm going to say Auburn is next. Not because I think Missouri's that much better than Auburn, just because Arkansas, for whatever reason, just doesn't beat Missouri. And until they do, I'm not going to pick them to win that game. So,
fair enough, yeah.
But, yeah, I'd probably rank them around there.
So Auburn's big opponent in the non-conference before they play Arkansas, 2 weeks before they play Arkansas, is Cal.
Ooh, watch out.
Well, maybe. I mean, that's what everybody said last year.
Yeah.
And then Auburn squeaked one out. But I think at home, it's not being played at midnight like it was last year. I think Auburn's going to be able to take care of business. But you guys have an interesting non-con opponent too.
Yeah. Playing Oklahoma State in Stillwater week 2 at 11 a.m. So it's going to be hot. It's going to be hot as balls. Yeah, I think so. Oh, let me put it this way. That, to me, is the most important game. Like, if Arkansas wins that game in week 2,
okay,
that is going to change the entire trajectory of the season. Because Arkansas's toughest part of their schedule is the second half, no doubt.
Sure.
But if you start 3-0, because that's what pretty much you do against UAPB, and then next we have a non-conference opponent right before you're going into Auburn. If you're 3-0 going into Auburn.
Oh, y'all play UAB.
UAPB.
Oh, okay. Somebody plays UAB, and I'm like, they're going to win that game.
No, I think Arkansas actually does play UAB now.
Yeah,
think about it, but
it is UAB.
Yes, yeah, you're right. So yeah.
I don't think that's a gimme for y'all, by the way.
It's not. There's no such thing as a gimme for Arkansas anymore. Not in football. There's no such thing.
Got it.
So,
yeah, y'all are a basketball school now.
That's right. So, but yeah, it's just if they're 3-0 going into that Auburn game, you get to the bye week is after 6 games. If you can get to 3-3, that at least is okay. But find a way to go 4-2, maybe. Like maybe you beat an Auburn, maybe you beat a team like, I don't want to start throwing out like Tennessee at home, but like maybe you do. Maybe you finally beat A&M in the final year in Arlington. Find a way to do that. You're going to be in great shape.
Yes. That'd be huge.
Yeah,
that'd be huge.
But if you lose to Oklahoma State, I just don't like their chances of doing anything with it.
Is Sam Pittman here next year at Media Days?
No. And I'm not even saying just because he gets fired. I just think no matter what, if Arkansas, I've been saying this to everybody, it's not anything I have on sources. It's not anything that I'm like, I got some reporting over here. I'm getting the scoops. It's just a gut feeling. I just feel like even if Arkansas went 8-4 this year, which would be a good year for them, I think he retires.
Really?
I do. I just feel like it's been 5 years at Arkansas. College football has changed so much. I just don't see the joy from him anymore. Like his first couple of years,
he was
talking
like this
about
jolly guy,
which I know he was winning more, so that helped.
Yeah.
But he's just like, I'm gonna have my old cold beer, and
right.
just giggling and stuff. You just haven't
Turn
seen
up
him
that
so
jukebox.
Yeah,
all
you
that
don't
stuff.
see that anymore. And so I don't know. I just feel like because of the NIL, because of how so much has changed, just a gut feeling. I just don't think he has the joy anymore. And I think he retires, and I think he moves on, and he sails off. He just wants to have one final year where he doesn't end on a bad note like he did last year.
Sure. That's respectable. I know it's impossible to project this far out, especially when there's so many questions for both of these teams, but Arkansas going to Auburn to start off conference play. What do you think the X factor is for Arkansas in that game?
Well, let me ask you before we get into that. Let me ask you a question first. What do you feel like the atmosphere will be for that game? Like, will it be electric? Like, is Auburn going to be set up to be undefeated going into that game type of deal?
Yeah, they should be 3-0.
Okay.
And the biggest game of the year is the following week.
Okay.
Everybody's kind of thinking, okay, if you're 4-0 and you host Oklahoma, that's kind of the pivotal game on Auburn's schedule. I think it's going to be some juice in the stadium for sure, just because Jordan Hare always kind of has that.
Okay.
But I'm thinking the following week, I think there's going to be some people that choose to go the following week.
Okay.
Also, Auburn starts with 5 home games in a row.
Impressive. That's nice.
Well, that's brutal on a fan. 5 home games in a row, that's a lot. Giving up 5 weekends in a row, a lot of people can't do that. Yeah. And so, if you want to go to Oklahoma, do you go to Arkansas the week before? So I think it's going to be. I think there's going to be a good environment, but I don't think it's going to be like the classic Jordan Hare primetime experience. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I believe it's a night game if I'm not mistaken. Will be Arkansas and Auburn. I think they said it a 4-night game.
Well, that changes that then.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But if that's the case, if the atmosphere's there, it's going to come down to this. Speaking about the X factor, it's going to come down to Bobby Petrino and Taylor Green, because this team's going to go as good as the offense goes. Because I don't expect the defense to be elite. Okay. They're going to be good on defensive line. They're going to be solid in the secondary, but the linebackers it may get really bad there.
Yeah.
They just have to do enough. But if the offense can move the ball effectively against Auburn, if Petrino can go out there and getting some flow going, I think that's what it's going to come down to. Or if you told me Arkansas won the game, in my mind, I'm going to process it. I was like, okay, well, Taylor Green and Bobby Petrino must have had a great game.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Right now, you're picking Auburn.
I'm picking Auburn.
Yeah,
Arkansas, it's hard to pick them in any game, to be honest, right now.
I understand. I get it.
You got UAPB and Little Rock on a Thursday night to start the season.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. They only put the biggest and best teams and programs on a Thursday night.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
So, no, but this is such a weird year for Arkansas. I know it's, people are hoping, but until they actually see any results. Because Sam Pittman, you can't go 9-4, 7-6, and 4-8. And get people excited.
It's not a good trend. No, it's not a good trend at all.
Yeah.
John, how can people check out everything if they want more Arkansas coverage?
What was this thing called the Locked On Razorbacks podcast? Just hit 10,000 subscribers, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, man. There's actually 10,000 people that said, I like this guy so much, I'm going to click this button. and show my support. So,
wow, how about that?
Yeah, #1 Razorback podcast in the land.
Not even
just
close.
Flexing on it. So, but yeah, you can find me on there, wherever podcasts are found, and on YouTube. You can also follow me on social media at John Nabors Show, where I tweet and trash talk of other fan bases and trigger them up and get them all upset. And
I love it. You
yeah,
do that?
Yeah, especially Auburn basketball. I know you guys love me so much over there at Auburn.
Sure.
Yeah.
I love you.
Yeah.
That's all that matters.
You guys are blue blood now, right? Is that not what
we
I was
are
told?
blue blood.
Blue
Thank you
blood,
for
yeah.
respecting that. 100%.
Totally. How many? You guys have been to? I think is it 13 NCAA tournaments now as a program? That's impressive. Arkansas has been to like 8 Final Fours.
Sure.
That's awesome, though. You guys are really coming along.
We've been the one.
That's cool.
What a run it was.
It was a good run. You guys should have been there, but can't be fouling people.
Sure. All right, then. There we go. Today's show brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy. The championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors, they know that they can get your whatever part you need for your car, truck, or SUV shipped right to your door, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With over 122 million parts for your ride or die, they have exactly what you need. When you go to your eBay Motors account, you can add your vehicle to your garage page, and then boom, you'll see all of the parts available for your vehicle, guaranteed, or of course you get your money back. Check it out, ebaymotors.com. Thank you to eBay Motors for sponsoring this show.
It's been a minute, but really good offseason for the Auburn Tigers. Freeze killed it in the portal again, and more importantly, he's killing it in the high school recruiting ranks.
Yeah, and at positions of need. Obviously, they needed to help Peyton Thorne out. It seems like, okay, that's the choice that they wanted to make going into the offseason, and so said, okay, we're going to make it as easy as possible for you to pay quarterback at Auburn. And so, yeah, they go out and get Robert Lewis in December to help him out at the wide receiver position, and then last month or a few months ago, adding Keandre Lambert-Smith from Penn State.
Let's talk about Peyton Thorne for a minute. Last year, obviously comes in after the spring, comes in during the summer. It's a difficult situation for any quarterback to be in, and obviously what was around him was not good enough. But his play was not good enough. I don't think any Auburn fan or media person questions that. What he put on the field was not good enough.
I'm sure Peyton would agree with you too.
I'm sure Peyton would say the same thing if you asked him directly. So what do you think? Obviously, you bring in some new pieces. How big of a step can he take and will he take in 2024 with a bunch of new pieces?
I mean, all the pressure is on him because you can't say, oh, what about the receivers? Or what about the schemes? It's Freeze is calling plays now. Or what about the offensive line? The offensive line seems to be better than a year ago. So the pressure is certainly all on him. I think he's going to be better. And I don't know if he was as awful as what the storylines around him were a year ago. But regardless, the production wasn't there. And so they're going to fix it. We'll see. But obviously throwing to Cam Coleman makes it a little bit easier. Throwing to KLS, I think, is going to make it easier. And I think Robert Lewis, as we mentioned earlier, I think he's kind of flying under the radar a little bit.
Percy Lewis as well at left tackle now. What is he, 6'1"?
Yeah, it's a big guy, and he moves so well.
Yeah.
And then the other tackle, Xavier Miller, too tall Miller, he's got a similar build. These guys are just really, really big, and they've got these lean lower bodies that allows them to move super well. I mean, I was talking about this yesterday with somebody here at Media Days, and we mentioned these receivers, we mentioned Jarquez Hunter and this running back room, and we haven't even mentioned Rivaldo Fairweather, who's going to be one of the more dynamic guys in this offense. And it's like all of a sudden Auburn actually has a roster on offense. They haven't had these kind of weapons since early maybe in the Malzahn era. And then even then, I almost would take this set of weapons versus, the 2013, 2014 receivers.
Talking to Zac Blackerby, Locked On Auburn. Obviously, they brought in receivers last year in the portal that, Jair Shorter, Javarius Johnson, things didn't work out. How high were your hopes for those guys going into last year before, they kind of, for the most part, all flopped?
Yeah, I mean, I was really high on Shorter. We did hear that there was kind of some issues with, I think he had some sort of injury. Was it his knee maybe? I don't remember the exact details, but that's kind of why it took them a while to accept, that commitment. But obviously he didn't turn out. I fully bought into Shane Hooks as well a year ago. That was kind of the big one. Hollywood Hooks, we were already kind of branding him that, and he had that that mega
the one hand in spring practice.
Yeah, that's right. And then the Auburn social media team ran with that, and so the hype was so real.
Yeah.
It was so real. Obviously, they didn't pan out. The big difference is they've got guys that have done it at a high level, not at North Texas, and not at, what was he, from Jackson State? Isn't that right? So,
yes.
They got guys that did it at Penn State. They got guys that did it at Georgia State, and I think that's going to be a big difference.
Let's talk about Cam Coleman in terms of a guy who hasn't done it yet, but certainly looks to be the focal point of the offense. How realistic is it? Now, often on our station, it's compared like Ryan Williams, the impact he'll have for Alabama versus the impact Cam Coleman can have for Auburn.
Okay.
I think the difference is, one, obviously, Ryan Williams skipped his senior year of high school, and then two, Auburn needs Cam Coleman to come in right away and be that guy. Not only Ryan Williams probably needs to fill out a little bit more. Cam Coleman has the receiver prowess and the physique to come into the SEC and immediately be a factor. That being said, It's still really hard to come in as a freshman and be productive and be a number one receiver in the SEC as a freshman. It's happened, but it doesn't really happen. So, I mean, how much is Auburn banking on him? Not saying he's not going to be, because I think he's going to be phenomenal. I get a little hesitant when a team almost has all their eggs in the basket of a receiver who's been on campus for 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, there's a blueprint for it.
Yeah.
There's a blueprint for freshman receivers making an impact. But those are always the exception to the rules. And then you look at Cam Coleman, it's like, can he be the exception? It's like, yeah, he probably can.
Yeah.
He probably can. Another difference between Cam and Ryan didn't go through spring, right? And so, obviously that's going to be a big part.
He still had to graduate high school a year early.
A year early, which is very impressive. But, so obviously that's something too. And I mean, Cam Coleman went through all the stuff you would expect a young player to go through early through spring, where it's like, okay, the routes weren't fully there because he's used to just dominating whoever was covering him, right? And so it just sounds like he was an absolute sponge and just soaking up information and adapting to the coaching. And then we saw kind of the product of that at A-Day.
If things don't go well with Peyton Thorne again, I think he will be improved, but let's say quarterback is still a reason why the team isn't winning games early in the season as the SEC schedule gets started. Is the backup plan? I mean, Hank Brown played really well in the bowl game, and it was probably Peyton Thorne's worst moment in the bowl game against Maryland. At least the pick six was.
It wasn't good.
That was one of the worst throws I've ever seen.
It wasn't good.
Yeah, so it trended in the wrong direction, whereas Hank Brown came in, did some really productive things. People take away what they want from a bowl game. Brian Smith a couple weeks ago told me pretty much no chance Walker White gets in this year, and that he's even behind Holden Garner.
I don't think he's ready. And that doesn't mean he's not going to be good. It's just I don't think he's ready. This is a guy who physically has everything you want. I just think mentally it's going to take him a little bit longer. I mean, he played private school ball in Arkansas. Like, that's a big jump to the SEC. But the guy's a grinder. He's going to get there. But, yeah, I think right now if something were to happen to Peyton Thorne, or if they had to pull him for performance or injury or whatever reason, yeah, I do think Hank Brown's the number 2 guy right now.
Is Holden Garner still going to be on the roster come fall? I mean, it's credit to him.
Come this fall?
Yeah, credit to him for not, leaving. What is the path? He doesn't have a path to be the starting quarterback in Auburn, barring a disaster injury situation this year.
I think sometimes we forget that these kids and these guys are dudes that maybe just want to be in college and go to a certain school. Talk to folks close to Holden entering the transfer portal window. It's like getting an Auburn degree is important to him. And so he graduates in December, and we'll see what happens after he gets that degree.
In-state recruiting for Hugh Freeze has been unbelievable. I think he has 3 of the top 5 players in the state of Alabama.
6 or 7 of the top 10,
Zeroing in on Keldrick Falk's brother as well, Jacaleb. I mean, how much... Obviously, he's emphasized it, but you've covered Auburn since, the last guy, and the report around...
Who was that?
Yes, exactly.
Who?
And that guy, who will remain unnamed, inexplicably, the report was he wasn't going to Thompson High School. He wasn't in Mobile. He might have been in Mobile for an event one time, but he wasn't going to these high schools.
Right.
Just in terms of a day-to-day operation, like, you go from complete incompetence to locking down the state. I mean, how did it happen so quickly?
I mean, I think effort. I mean, I think people want to go to Auburn, but you got to build relationships with these kids, and he's got a really good staff. I mean, every hire he's made, it's been with recruiting in mind, and so everybody on this staff, I think, is a pretty exceptional recruiter in their own right. So, I mean, You get guys who want to acquire talent and who are relentless, and eventually, like, Auburn's not a hard sell.
Yeah.
It's just it wasn't being sold to anybody.
This year, I believe you've said it, the Oklahoma game, most important game on the schedule. Realistically, I mean, I've asked you this last year as well, ceiling and floor for Auburn in 2024.
So I answer, everybody has a different definition of ceiling and floor.
Yeah.
Like, when you ask me what the ceiling is, I think true best case scenario.
Yeah, of course.
Which is 10-2, 11-1. That's the best case scenario. Now, a ton of things would have to happen. I'm not predicting that, but I think that's what the true ceiling is you win every game and you probably lose to Georgia and Bama on the road. But every other game is totally winnable. Like, that's the best case scenario. And I think the floor is the opposite of that. You're looking at a 5-7 situation. Yeah. But the truth is usually somewhere in the middle, and I think Auburn
7-5, 8-4.
7-5 or 8-4. Yeah.
I think Auburn has a relative. It's hard to say manageable because they go, every year they have to go every other year they have to go to Athens and to Tuscaloosa. But other than that, like you said, it's pretty manageable. Oklahoma at home is not going to be tough, but you get A&M at home instead of having to go to College Station this year. I think 7 wins should. Obviously, New Mexico State happened last year, but 7 wins was almost the floor last year. And when you lose one of those bye games, essentially, yes, it derails that a little bit. 7 wins really should be looked at as the floor. What do they need to do on the field this year that they didn't do last year? Even if it is 7-5, I think 7-5, 6-6 is probably should not happen again this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hold on to the ball longer.
Yeah.
I mean, they were so bad on third down. It was just 3 and out after 3 and out after 3 and out, and then there were times like the LSU game where it's like you didn't get a drive going until like almost halftime. But yeah, you're right. I mean, let's assume they beat Cal, which I think they will, and you win all your non-conference games. You're at 4. I think you beat Arkansas at home.
Beat Arkansas by 30 on the road last year.
Yeah.
I should hope you beat Arkansas
Yeah, for
at home.
sure. And then you've got Vanderbilt at home. You feel good about that one. Similar thing. You whoop them on the road, and I think they beat A&M at home. And so then you look at Oklahoma. And can you steal one on the road at Kentucky or Missouri? Yeah, 100%. I think Auburn should go 8-4 or better, but they've got to do it.
How shocked things were trending up, and I hate to bring up the New Mexico State game, but things were trending up. I mean, things were a disaster. Then Peyton Thorne comes out and throws 3 touchdowns in the first half against Arkansas. Yeah. Suddenly the passing game looks competent. You expect to beat Vanderbilt, but they hammer Vanderbilt. And that, everything's building to this Iron Bowl matchup in Jordan-Hare Stadium, which still, I mean, the New Mexico State game didn't impact it. It was still as close as possible. But then that happens, and it's incredible how much different the first season would be looked at.
100%.
One, had that not happened, 2, if you beat Alabama, but I mean,
even if the 4th and 31 still happens, and if you beat New Mexico State, you almost beat Georgia, you almost beat Alabama, you almost beat Ole Miss.
You had a winning record.
You had a winning record, sure. You've got a top 10 recruiting class, and it's like, okay, well, wow, they're so close, and it's already year 1. He doesn't even have his dudes yet. Like, that's the narrative, but that's not what it is because of that. I mean, it was a historically bad loss. Yeah. And that's one that is going to be worn by Hugh Freeze for the rest of his career, unless he just does something incredible like what Nick Saban did after the La Monroe loss in his first year. But you forget about that when you win championships, right?
The fan base is as rabid as anyone. What do you think they have to do this year? I mean, 8-4 I think would satisfy the fan base and people would be pretty excited because I think everyone agrees 2025 is the year. 2025 is the year they're supposed to be really good. They should be better this year, but do you think 7-5 or do you think it has to be 8-4 for the fan base to be, continue to buy in? Because they're still bought in right now, even with 6-7 last year.
Yeah, it probably depends on what that 7-5 looks like. Like, are you competitive on the road in Tuscaloosa and in Athens? Because you haven't been. You haven't been competitive on the road in those places. So, what does that look like? But I would think 8-4 would make most of the fan base that has incredibly high expectations. I think 8-4 would make a lot of them happy.
What should I ask Keldrick Falk tomorrow? I'm scheduled for 12:15.
What's he going to do to help increase, his effectiveness in the pass rush? I think that's it. I mean, you can make the case that Keldrick is one of, if not the most important player on this team, because Auburn's defense, it only works if you can rush the passer, and you feel good about Jalen McLeod. But who's going to be that other guy? Is it going to be Kieran Crawford that they got from Arkansas State? Or is it going to be Keldrick Falk? Is he going to take that step forward as a pass rusher? It's crucial, absolutely crucial for Auburn's defense. All right, that does it for today's happy hour edition of Locked On Auburn. Of course, tomorrow we're going to have a bunch of Auburn stuff as we wrap up everything that happened at SEC Media Days, and of course everything Hugh Freeze and Peyton Thorne, Eugene Asante, and Keldrick Falk said at Media Days. Please like the video, please subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.